Nicole, you got anything to add?
No, sir.
Kathy, anything?
I'm good, thank you.
David, anything to add to the agenda?
No.
Earl, anything
No,
to add?
all set.
Ed?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
James?
Yes, I forgot about you, sorry.
That's okay, I'm sitting in the audience. We need to, so Leader's ready to have $250,000 left of the million.
Yeah.
They're ready to release $150,000, so we just need approval from the board, so I'd like to add that
Yep.
as 6B.
6B. Okay,
Thank you.
yep. Anything else? All right. I hear a motion to approve the minutes from September 7th regular select board meeting.
I'll move.
I second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Public comment. Anybody got anything to comment on that's not on the agenda? Nicole?
If I may, just offer the community an update. As a chamber representative, on Sunday, September 19th, it was reported multiple times from many Swanton residents that Sam, our swan, had been suffering a medical episode, which turned out to be seizures. On Monday, September 20th, after consultation with 2 vets, Sam was put down. It was in his best interest as he was suffering greatly. We will miss Sam very much, and we will continue to keep the Swanton community informed when a new Sam is brought in. And if you have any other questions, please direct them to the Chamber President, Adam Paxman.
Thank you. Anybody on Zoom? I don't see anything. All right. Newtown business. Discuss some Calm Shore Bay issues with state officials. Who wants to go first on that topic?
I guess I could start. Karen Bates, Agency of Natural Resources, Irish Water Investment Division. And I'm the basin planner for the area. I was invited to come talk about potential sources of the problems that landowners are seeing along the shoreline and potential solutions that maybe the town can assist with. First, the conditions, and that we will ask Peter to chime in, who is on the line. But before that, I think you all saw that it's a fairly shallow there right now, which means that then emergent vegetation can grow, the reeds, which are very similar to what's growing at the very head of the bay there. It's a natural wetland system, and the shallow water is what really driving that for the most part. So Peter has some history of lake levels in Lake Champlain in this area, and then also potentially nutrient levels, because a higher nutrient level will also support the algal growth. Even though it's natural, it could increase what's there than what would normally be there. And the algal growth plus the organic matter and the wetness of the soil would add to some of the smells that people are smelling as well. Decomposition and anoxic conditions. I think that's a good summary.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Can you guys hear me in there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Peter Isles. I'm from Vermont, DC. I'm an aquatic ecologist working on the Lake Champlain long-term monitoring program. So yeah, I don't want to take too long with this, but just kind of touch briefly on sort of the large-scale things that we think are maybe responsible or contributing to the aquatic plant growth this year, both this year in particular and kind of more long-term. So I'll just share my screen for a second and show a few figures. And then
Here, AC. Yep. David, can you turn that AC off?
Speak up. You just need to speak up already.
There we go. Go ahead, Peter.
All right. It says that the host is disabled screen sharing. I don't know if you guys can allow that.
I can still see you. We can hear you.
He wants to share his screen.
Oh, sorry. Technology.
I'm not sure when these are plugged in, but if they plug into here, they will amplify the sound.
Oh, really? I don't know. Hey, where are these plugged in the
Okay,
speakers?
try it now, Peter.
All right, that works.
Can we plug those speakers in? Oh, there we go. That'll make it much better. Oop, we're under the computer. There we go, right here.
All right, so
You need them both?
first I just want to show
Kathy,
the
you
view
can plug
side
the other
of
one.
the lake level. So this is from the gate of Wellington, but this is from the lake. So this is the time series going back to about 2007, and then you can.
Made it worse.
2021 was quite a dry year, and throughout the year, lake levels have been pretty low. You can also see kind of a general downward trend over this period of time, at least, of average lake levels in the lake. I don't know if that holds up over a longer record. This is just as long as we have gauge data available at this gauge. So sometimes those can be kind of natural oscillations every kind of 10 years or so, but sometimes that could be more of a long-term trend. But if we just look at this year, so this year is showing lake level on the vertical axis against day of year on the x-axis, and this year is shown in red here. So what you can see was that for a lot of this year, particularly early on in the year, the water levels were very low in the lake. And we know that this can have a big influence on the growth of aquatic plants because it regulates how much lake is available. So in a low water year, there might be larger areas of the lake with enough light for aquatic plant growth to really take off, and that could contribute to the high levels of aquatic plants that we saw, both sort of in your area, but then we also had complaints in other parts of the lake, particularly the gut and some other areas, as well as around the state. So I think this is not a unique phenomenon to your area, but it does seem to be something that's going on this year. And again, we aren't positive that this is the cause of it, but that's our best guess. And of course, you have a lot of shallow areas near where you guys are in Macklin Bay, so particularly if you have a low water year during that early time of year when water is generally quite high, you could have sort of much larger areas where aquatic plant growth could take off. So that's sort of our best guess as to what's happening this year with aquatic plants. But to kind of put that in a nutrient context, here again is just one more lake level plot showing here 2021 with the lowest spring water levels. So that's between March and June, which is when, sort of the period when most of the aquatic plant growth tends to happen. So this is kind of the biggest way in which this year is an outlier in terms of things we think might contribute to this growth for aquatic plants. In terms of nutrient levels and algal blooms, which is kind of the other sort of associated topic that we were told you want to discuss in this meeting, here's a figure showing chlorophyll in the water in the northeast arm. So this is the closest long-term monitoring site we have where you are, or it's a bit farther south in the northeast arm. So what you're looking at here is just over time the amount of phytoplankton, which includes cyanobacteria, in the northeast arm. And you can see that kind of in the recent 5 to 10 years, you seem to see an increase in cyanobacteria in that area. We also see that in the number of reports we get of cyanobacteria blooms. So this is from our cyanobacteria monitoring program. Particularly draw your attention to the figure on the right, which shows some reports sort of from non-normal monitoring reports, but sort of exceptional reports that people call in reporting blooms. And you can see that in 2019 and 2020 we had a lot of those in the inland area. So this, we're not sure. This data is a bit difficult to analyze. It's very noisy and it's very uneven in terms of where we get reports. But it does seem like there may be some increase in bloom activity over the last couple of years. So the other part of this question is phosphorus concentrations, of course, which are driving a lot of these increases in blooms. The one thing that's going on in the northeast arm, which is remarkable in Lakeshore Plain, is we have pretty rapidly increasing phosphorus concentrations there. So in this figure, the white circles are representing the surface water, and the gray circles represent the deeper waters. So generally speaking, the deeper waters have higher phosphorus concentrations, and they've also increased over time. We've seen a steady increase in the surface water as well. And this is true of both total and dissolved phosphorus. These increases are happening most strongly in August and September, so that this you can look at the slope of the increase over time. in each month, and you see the dust slope is highest during August and September, and which indicates that that's, which is important because that's often when cyanobacteria blooms, and it can be a very force. And this is again the same plot showing the deep water where the slopes are even greater. So kind of the takeaway from all of this is that it seems that we have increase in deep water phosphorus, which is likely driven by internal nutrient loading, maybe increasing over time in the northeast arm. So this is kind of a background pressure for it to increase cyanobacteria, as well as increased plant growth in the northeast arm because essentially we have more nutrients available. And this is largely driven by kind of a seasonal decrease in dissolved oxygen from concentration in that deep water. So here, again, the gray squares are representing the deep water, and the white circle is the surface water. So what you can see is that in the deep water, the oxygen declined over the course of each year, and this spot is some internal nutrient loading. So that's kind of just a broad context of sort of the two main factors that we think are affecting water quality relevant to this conversation. So one is the really low water level of this year leading to the excessive plant growth, we think. And then the second point is a longer-term trend of increasing phosphorus in this section of the lake, which is a pressure towards increasing plant growth and increasing blooms. So I'll stop there and take any questions, or if not, can take over, I guess, and address some more of the permanent countries, but maybe better to start with science questions. I'll let you guys dictate.
We'll start with the select board first. Peter, do you guys have any questions for Peter? Anybody? No.
Is there any monitoring of nutrient sources that might possibly be coming into that Palm Bay area?
So we don't have any monitored tributaries specifically feeding into Macklin Bay. We have, I think the closest would be probably the St. Albans tributaries, but that's kind of a special case. And then I think a lot of the water in that area is coming through Missisquoi Bay, so that's probably where the bulk of the water coming down into there is coming, because it's just.
So what you're saying is that because of the situation with Missisquoi Bay has an effect on that bay too?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a net flow of water through Missisquoi Bay into the northeast arm, because the northeast arm has no major tributaries directly entering into it, so it's a net receiver of water from Missisquoi Bay, which has a pretty big watershed.
Go to
Peter,
I had one more question.
oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on a second.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna clarify, so Kent here is, should I tell him?
Yeah,
Kent is disagreeing with you in terms of flow of water. He has an opinion.
it's been our experience with the water that leaves the Missisquoi Bay through the West Swanton to Albert Causeway area, that we believe that water, that current is actually going down along the Albert shore and down to North Hero, and is actually being constricted at that area. It's quite a complex situation as to where that water, is actually going, but to say that the water from the Missisquoi Bay is actually slowing and dumping sediment there, I think it would need some more investigation before I'd say that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, for sure, sediment transport in particular, I wouldn't say anything about.
So I guess the bottom line is nobody really has identified any sources where it's coming from. That hasn't even been done at this point in time.
We do have, because we can't monitor everything, so what we do is we also have some assumptions based on how we know water leaves the landscape and where water might have high phosphorus levels based on what is on the landscape. So we can assume that anything washing into the Macon Bay is going to be affected by road runoff. If there's sand Mr. George was saying that in the winter, there's a lot of sand put on the road, so that could add phosphorus. And in the ag fields, or in that whole area that has sort of open land, you may also, you usually have some discharge of phosphorus, especially in the high flow periods. And so we know there's going to be, because this is an active area, it's not all forest. If it was all forest, we'd say there's nothing coming in. But we know that we've got enough developed lands, roads, lawns, ag, that there is phosphorus coming in.
Okay, that's pretty much boilerplate.
Yeah.
You know, with where phosphorus is going into the lake.
Yeah.
But this doesn't, is there any tributaries that feed in that would have an effect on that McQuam area?
Based on my education, I would say anything that drains into the bay across the culvert would be suspect, and there are drainages that come from, the largest drainage that I've seen is east of McQuam Shore, and it drains ag fields and then comes, and I'm trying, is it just above James Road? People must know where that trip is.
Yeah,
It's like
there's a
the-
culvert right there. We had to fix a few years back. We
So
replaced,
a
so.
lot of the time it doesn't, no water comes out of that, but it has a large watershed, and so if there's a lot of rain, a lot of snow melt, it's gonna carry anything in that area into that trip. And there has been some algae in it, I've seen it past years. So it's not a pristine stream, and it will have higher levels of phosphorus in it.
But it's never been sampled to determine what the levels are, and has any changes over the last 5 to 10 years in land use practices had an effect on that. You don't have no way of documenting that.
We just know that it's a source of phosphorus, but we don't know if it's changed, if it's gotten worse or better over the years.
Right. It seems like a real good place to start if we're gonna do anything really
Yeah.
to at least eliminate the future phosphorus load going in. But then the other determination we need to determine, I agree with Dr. Henderson. I don't really believe that water from Siskiyou Bay is flowing in there. I don't even believe that the water from that's coming out of that James Road culvert is making it to the north end of McQuam, because that water flows that way way over to get to the St. John's River to get up to the Richelieu. So,
Yeah.
I mean, water flows only one way. That'll probably never change. If it does, I don't want to be around, but. So, you know, I think there's a lot here that we don't know that we really need to get working on.
But one thing that Peter did talk about was that there is phosphorus in lake sediment that's just accumulated over the years. You know, and we didn't care what we put in at wastewater treatment plants, milk processing, whatever. Washing machines, we just dumped it in the lake. So the sediment has a lot of phosphorus in it. And when you get to a certain oxygen level at the bottom of the lake, the phosphorus actually can be released. And he was showing you that in the deeper parts of Mekong Bay, that's where the blue-green algal blooms happen. Which, you know, when I heard about it, I think Mr. Jordan was telling me, you go out in a boat and then you might get some blue-green algae. And I was wondering why, and that's why, because the sediment, the phosphorus that exists in the lake sediment gets released during the season when the lake stratifies and loses all its oxygen at the bottom of the lake. So that's a source of phosphorus. It's in the sediment itself. And so it could be on the mud flats as well. And it just doesn't get released as much, but it could be there to help add. Now that means that that's a source that we can't do anything about, but at least we know that that might be why some things are happening. And it may not be that you have to worry, the primary concern is phosphorus coming in now, but it would be something to remember, as you said. Let's make sure it doesn't get any worse. And so I think that's a great strategy. What can you do to make sure that phosphorus inputs to that bay doesn't get any worse? And we don't know, like along the shoreline, if everybody fertilizes lawn at that very high level and there's rain in the spring, that could be a phosphorus that would be a problem. But It's not like the Missisquoi River is dumping, acres and acres, well, thousands of acres of.
Well, I don't wanna take up all the time because we have some concerned residents here. I'm sure have some questions for you too, but, I guess my opinion is we need to do a little bit more monitoring. We need to get some data started. How you gonna know if you're making a change if you don't start something? You gotta start somewhere. And, that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, so we can help there. We have an organization that can help sample, and we have a program, the La Rosa Partnership Program, that will support that. The only thing he doesn't have is the ability to cover his, again,
I know.
we don't pay for his person hours. So it can be, if it's of interest to you, and maybe there's some volunteers that can help him out, and maybe he can find a funding source to help him with his hours, and we can do the analysis, then we could start testing the waters where you had discharge from concentrated flow in certain areas. And it wouldn't be a lot because you don't have a lot of streams. And he's also going to do the assessment along the shoreline. He can tell you about that, but will also maybe provide some ideas.
Well, maybe Dr. Henderson and the residents that live along the Macomb should be having their own meeting. I don't know if there's anybody on the select board that's opposed to doing something like that.
No, I don't have a problem with that. We need some kind of committee for the McCollum Bay to spearhead this, issue. I don't know. There's a lot of officials out here from the state. Is there any grants out there, anything to help with something like this?
Okay, so the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain has a $36,000 grant to study the shoreline of Swanton and Hyde. And that's why I'm here, is to get information tonight about what you are thinking about in areas of your concern. But we're going to look at the 250 yards in from the lake shore, everything along the shore, everything along the roads, and where are the priority areas that need to be investigated. And we could include that in our report. And so I'm really listening. I got it real clear, Earl, to be looking at the trips that are going in, and then we'll work with the scientists. We haven't done we just barely got approval from Lake Champlain Basin Program to go to work. So I don't have anything to present to you right now, but we are developing our plan on what to research, and so these comments are real helpful tonight.
Well, go ahead.
Can I speak?
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to say that there was way more information in those slides than I could ever digest.
Yeah.
So, can they
Can
be
you
part of the
identify yourself,
minutes?
sir, for the notes?
Pardon?
Can you identify yourself, sir?
Yep.
Gordon Clements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope they'll be part of the minutes, because I'm very interested.
Yep. Actually, I can add. Peter, is that information available anywhere online that you just give us?
I'm happy to send it to you.
Okay. Yeah.
I
If you
don't have it online, I have those slides.
if you want to send information to David, and then David could disperse that information, or can we?
My
Yeah.
email is on the town website, town administrator.
Yeah.
I have 3 points. Second point.
No problem. Go ahead.
Is, we live on the lake, so we are interested in the lake. We do not use fertilizers on our grass, and I don't think anybody else does either. So spending a whole lot of time working on that part, I think, is a waste of effort. Thirdly, what I believe is happening, and I'm not a scientist, so I probably am all wrong, is that in the winter, all of the weed that grows in the lake, at the bottom of the lake, is carried up onto the shore by the ice and left on the shore as the ice leaves. This is a huge deposit of very fertile, I don't call it soil, but it's something. And man, does stuff grow on that. I think that a great deal could be done by just removing that sediment in about the 1st of May. After it's dried out, before the growth has started. 'Cause I believe that is a way bigger contributor than the farms, the lawns, the runoff of the roads, or anything else. That's it.
Good.
Hi, I'm Denise Simard, and I have a question. I was talking with somebody and researching. The University of Chicago is actually doing a phosphorus sponge, a sponge to absorb phosphorus, and I don't know if the state of Vermont has looked into that at all, or how successful it is, but the guy I was talking to said that it absorbs the phosphorus, and then they're able to get that phosphorus back out and use it for other purposes.
Anybody out there ever heard of that?
So there are,
Oh,
go ahead, Peter.
Peter's.
I can say, and we do keep our eye on such things, and there are a number of kind of treatments that are talked about. And the question is always if it's appropriate for the scale and the kind of concentrations that we have. But I think a lot of those kind of technologies work really well in really high phosphorus environments like wastewater treatment, but for ambient kind of lake levels of phosphorus, I think they're frequently economically impractical to use. It's just, they wouldn't have enough if they need to pull out the amount of phosphorus from the lake that we need to unless we cover the whole lake with it.
Peter, you'll have to speak up.
I didn't
very
quite get all
clearly.
that.
Right, basically, we do keep an eye on such things, but I think at this point we haven't identified anything that seems like it would work given the concentrations of phosphorus in the lake and the size of the area that we would have to treat. The applications where they seem most promising are usually kind of more concentrated point sources of phosphorus. But again, that's very site specific in terms of how much water is flowing through and how much absorption capacity the different materials have.
All right. Mr. George?
If I could follow up on Gordon's comments, I tend to agree that, and especially with winds blowing north as they do, we do get a lot of decaying plant matter blowing in. I don't think it's all been grown in our fertile water, but quite a bit blowing in. The state folks have said to us down at the site visit that the state doesn't support removing any of the existing growth, but what would the state's response be to scraping up some of that stuff that, it seems to me, as that material sits on the ground and decays, that over time that's helping make the bay shallower too. So is that something that could be supported given the existing state regulations?
So, we did, Kim Jensen with Vermont DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, Lakes and Ponds Program. I was at the site visit. And so we talked about the growth of vegetation onshore, on the shoreland. And then you mentioned vegetation on ice and potentially removing vegetation. So any type of project that you'd want to manage the vegetation along the shore would have to go through our permitting team. So that's something that could be assessed to see if a project could be developed to manage the shoreline vegetation. So we're not talking about aquatic vegetation, we're talking about shoreline vegetation. And so any...
Dead, severed shoreline.
Right.
Not when it's clippings, I would call it more than vegetation.
Yep, so again, this year we've had a lot of records all throughout the lake on huge mats of vegetation in Lake Champlain, all throughout the bays, mainly where they're washing up on shore. So that was a huge discovery kind of this year, that we had so many instances. We probably received at least 5 calls from people throughout Lake Champlain about masses of aquatic plant beds being deposited on shore. So would we remove that? That would be a permitted thing. You'd have to go talk to our permitting team to see if that would be an allowable project to manage. And they would take into the consideration all of the environmental, cultural, and social, and monetary facts. So,
But cutting, let me interrupt, cutting to the chase, in our fragile bay, we talked about the problem, and I've also heard through some of you folks and through the grapevine that the permitting process is a very lengthy process that we, is there not something that the state could advocate for and do without this cumbersome permitting process to get something done?
so the state is the manager of the ecosystem, or the Agency of Natural Resources. So we're looking at the public resource use of the land. So it's not just this community, it's the entire community of the state. And we are the protectors of the land. So when you want to manage the natural resource, you do have to go through the permitting process. I would think that you should work with a local partner, such as Friends of Lake Champlain, to see what projects might be feasible to do before you even go to the permitting people. And that's what my recommendation would be, is to see what works around the different areas in Lake Champlain, what works for the folks up in North Hero, who have a weed harvesting program. They are harvesting aquatic plants, so they're now harvesting the shoreline plants that you're talking about. So quite a different type of project. And so that would have to go through the permits, because we are elected official, or we work for the elected officials, and we have to look at the entirety of the ecosystem.
So who are the elected officials?
I work for the people, and I work for the legislators, and we have a governor that also.
So we should take this up with our legislators.
And
Run now, Brad.
I think the first persons and people to work with is your local resource providers, and that's, the Friends of Lake Champlain, your people sitting in this room, and work with everybody to come to what will work,
So why can't,
Actually, I should,
What's that?
I didn't want to just take a question.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
can I ask her a question?
I just have one question first. So you're saying the folks that live along the lake, no matter where it is, if they go out there with a wheelbarrow and their rake and clean up the junk that washes up on the land from the water, that's not okay to do that?
No, you don't need a permit for that.
You don't need a
can
permit for that.
You can
Okay.
do anything with your hands.
Yeah,
It's once you start doing anything with a mechanical means.
piece of equipment or whatever.
Piece of equipment, or you're using herbicides,
Yeah.
or other kinds of things, that's when you need a permit.
But what if we're not cutting anything, we're just scooping up dead?
You can certainly do that with your hands. Yeah.
And doing that on our individual. pieces
What's
of
that? Someone's got a question on there?
property
Okay, just a sec.
Will accomplish virtually nothing. So
Yeah.
That's why, to me, it's a little disheartening that the state doesn't have.
Well, that's why I asked the question, the rake and the wheelbarrow. I mean, is it not okay for someone to rake along their shoreline with a rake and a pitchfork? I mean,
You can certainly do that.
they can do
yes.
that. Okay. Well, you were referring to hands. I'm like, well, I don't think too many people are going to have their hands.
Yeah,
and
hand
scoop
tools.
up. Hand tools.
Hand tools.
Hand tools, okay. Yeah. Okay. I have
The
a,
answer to your question,
Yeah.
Gordon.
And why can't we harvest the aquatic weeds along the pond? Because that really impedes any water flow through there.
So if you wanted to do that by hand, using hand tools, you can. But if you wanted to harvest it from mechanical means, such as North Hero does, it's probably and St. Albans folks do that as well. They have a mechanical harvester, so that is a permitted activity. They apply to us to get to the permitting team to provide that project. What does it look like? How much are they harvesting? where are they harvesting, and they hire a harvester to do that. And one of the reasons why it's permitted, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there are some very rare threatened endangered species, that we want to make sure that is not being harvested. We want to make sure that we're supporting a functional ecosystem here. So there's a lot of situations that we have to take into consideration.
But again, I think cutting to the chase, at least I understood you to say during our site visit, Karen, that the growth that we have cannot be harvested.
It would be difficult, the emergent stuff, the grasses, I mean, they're rushes that are growing up.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know of any permit that we've issued to do that. Usually it's associated with recreation because it's so expensive to do. I mean, nobody's going to apply for a mass removal of vegetation because someone's got to pay for it. And we do have some grants, but for the most part, you just harvest what allows you then to recreate. So through an emergent area like that, probably the only approach that would make sense would be just harvesting an area for you to walk through. And so I think that's the message that I was providing, is that it doesn't happen for the most part. And so.
Because it would not be approved if we asked for a program to do it on a large scale. That's what I took away from your comment.
Not necessarily. I think, you came up with a plan and looked at the environmental impacts of it and then submitted that would be up to the permitting team, and they'd look at the public use and the impacts of that public resource.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that it could not be done, you have to come up with a plan, and then it would have to be approved through the permitting team.
This is all very good information, but from where I'm sitting, and I've lived on the lake all my life, and the Missisquoi Bay is as bad or worse, actually probably worse than where I was tonight in some spots, but we don't even know if these things we're talking about are gonna solve the problem, okay? What the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain are bringing here to this community is what we should be discussing. Because that would be the starting point of turning this around. And I think, this other dialogue isn't really gonna solve the problem because we're all gonna go home and, and nothing's gonna change. But they have the funding, they got the grant funding, it's part of what they're gonna do, and we need to work with them, and especially you people that live on the Guam shore need to be working with them because, you have the most at stake. I mean, water quality affects us all, but you even have it a little bit more because you own property there. And that's and how we go about that, I don't.
Somebody on the, someone on Zoom has a question, I gotta let them ask.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, could
Yes.
you identify yourself for us, please?
Yes, of course. My name is Al Norman, and this is Anna Morrison. We're at 8 Guam Shore, family-owned cottage for about 70 years. I think later in the agenda we're going to talk about the concept of an aquatic nuisance control grant. The problem that we have is that we are already living in a situation where the poor water conditions are denying us recreational use of the water. You could create a little pathway for yourself to go through and tell your grandchildren to try to walk through the path. But it's deteriorated to the point where it's serious muck. We called it muck wars because we're dealing with such deterioration, low water, a high level of phosphorus, plant decaying, and plant smells, which you can't cut a path through the smell that envelops you during the afternoons when you're sitting in your backyard. So we've already seen a significant deterioration in the quality of the water condition and the quality of life of the property that we're paying premium taxes on because of its location. So my question is that we'll talk about, I'm assuming, aquatic nuisance control, which was a suggestion that was made to one of our neighbors about what we could do about it. But could somebody just address, one of our state experts, address
what kind of aquatic mix of plants are we looking at in that northern Macquam Shore area? Are we talking about predominantly invasive, or are we talking about native species? And isn't trying to restore the ability to have recreational uses of the water, isn't that one of the priority areas for these ANC grants?
I speak to the grants if you want me
What's that?
to. I can speak about the grants.
Sure.
So again, this is Kimberly Jensen with the Aquatic Nuisance Species Control Program. So the Aquatic Nuisance Control Grant is for aquatic nuisance species. So that's plants are in the water that are aquatic. So we do have a funding source through motorboat registrations that we provide grants to municipalities for managing aquatic nuisance plants. What I saw today was not aquatic plants. It was more the shoreline plants that were the problem. So that does not mean that there is not an aquatic nuisance or aquatic plant problem. I just didn't see that today. We can come back and see what kind of aquatic nuisances are there. But today I was really seeing only the shoreline plants and responding to shoreline plants. So I'd prefer to come back to see what kind of aquatic plants are the nuisance.
I'm not sure, could you just clarify, the plants that you saw, some of the decaying plants that are now probably indiscriminate in terms of what they are, you'd have to look at the microscope to see what they are. A lot of that muck that was created 1 month ago was plants that were waving in the water. And as the water receded and as the sun baked on in the summer months of June and July, those plants eutrophied or turned into, basically dissolved in the water. So they were aquatic plants. Those are not. There is no. During the if you go up during that period of April and May, the water line goes right up to the edge of the docks in most of those camp areas, and there's water there. There's waves coming in, but in a matter of 6 or 8 weeks, you're looking at declining the receding water. And I went down in early July, and by hand, because I knew it was legal to do this, was pulling out some of the growth that was there and leaving it on the shore. That now looks like muck. I mean, doesn't look like an aquatic plant, but it was. So I'm not sure what your definition is of aquatic versus shoreline. What is shoreline to you? Are you talking about plants that were never in the water? Or that
No.
once were?
So to answer your question, the aquatic plants are in the water column, and the shoreline plants that we were seeing today were emerging from the water. Now, Peter talked about the low water levels. So of course, we're going to see plant growth from the aquatic to the shoreline that are increased because of that low water levels. And I think, getting back to the selectmen's, statement is we really have to look at the assessment of this area before we can really determine what to do next. And I think assessing the area, looking at the inputs, looking at the watershed, and then, making, and also we can come back, the state folks, we can come back and see what kind of aquatic plants are in there, what are the shoreline plants. Like next year we can come and take a look and see what really are the different plants in here and how are they affected by the nutrients. Then we can get a fuller picture. But I think right now we are just kind of throwing darts, and we have to really see what are the challenges that we're facing.
We just as a final comment, we as neighbors, I think I can speak for the 6 or 8 of us that have been the most upset by this total loss of recreational use of the properties that we own. The folks living there have to go out 20, 30, 40 feet to even find water that you can walk through. And we would welcome an inventory, the state doing an inventory of what's out there. And what is the mix? If you want to do that, you'll get full support from us on doing that, because we agree that you don't come up with the cure without a diagnosis of what's wrong. And we know from the smell and from the muck there, we know that we have a problem that has destroyed the recreational use of the water. But now we look to you as you've got the grant. I mean, you monitor the grants that come in. What is your suggestion? What will be your suggestion for 2022? Because the state gentleman that we spoke to said you all, like the village of Swanton and the town of Swanton should have a partnership to apply for one of these grants. It's not a large amount of money, but even beginning small controlled efforts to do cold harvesting of invasive plants, or to do work of removing some of the muck, anything besides just contemplating what to do would be a vast improvement over what we have today. But we don't want to wait another 2 or 3 years just to get a report back that says, gee, you have high phosphorus level, and you have a lot of muck here, and without any specific plan. So we would support you on doing the inventory, and if you want to do it in the spring, we'll walk through the water with you and look at the plants, and you tell us what they are.
Thank you.
What is the Friends with Northern Lake Champlain Basin? What is your plan and what is your schedule?
I've got it here, if you want me to read it, or if you want me to leave it for you.
Well, both. But I think it's important people understand just what you're proposing.
Our schedule is that we got the grant back in last December, and this is how things work with a federal grant. In that we selected a partner, an environmental engineering group, through a bid process, and we have just gotten their plan on how to get the work done approved by Lake Champlain Basin Program, and here we are in mid-September, so that's how slowly this moves. But what is supposed to happen now that it has been approved is that now watershed consulting engineers will start their digital data library and desktop assessment, which means sitting with the computer using the GPS, doing the geological survey that needs to be done to pick out the priority areas. Then the next part will be, and this will happen this fall, is that there will actually be field investigation. So they will go out on public property. They're not going to go on private property. They'll go out in kayaks, they'll go out in drones, and they're going to look at that shoreline, and they're going to look along the roads and all in the 250 yards to actually look at the area. After they have done that, they'll go through a modeling process, and they will rank projects, and it will be based on the amount of phosphorus that we think we can keep out of the lake. Our charge is not to remove nuisance plants. Our charge is not to change the shoreline or change those mud flats. That is not our aim. Our aim is to stop the pollution into the lake. And the idea about doing water testing, that would be above and beyond. That would be a different grant working with a different part of A&R. We do that on the Rock River. We've done that for years. I think I heard enough demand here tonight that I could probably get some support to go before La Rosa and do some of that. But after we've done the modeling, after we've done the ranking based on the numbers, then we'll come back to the community. That's what we did in the town of Georgia last spring. And we had 2 community meetings during a pandemic, so it was all virtual. It was a real challenge. Hopefully by next spring, things will be loosened up enough here that we can all get together and have a couple meetings for the community to look at what we've come up with, look at our ranking. Is this really right? Is this where the community wants to focus? And after that time, then we'll go back to their office. They're gonna pick out at least one project to bring to 30% design, that if the town feels it is valuable, you can go out and apply for a grant, apply for funding to go ahead with a project like that. We will present more than just one project. We'll have several best management practices that we will propose. In the town of Georgia, for instance, we had 23 projects just along the Georgia Shore Road of putting gravel wetlands or gravel swales in beside the road to collect the runoff before it gets in the lake. We have a couple projects on town property, the town beach, and a parking lot where we can do some collection there. So that's the sort of thing that we come up with. And then eventually there would be a final report, and to justify the money that's been spent. And then if the town decides, then later if the town decides to do a project, then either our watershed group or other watershed groups or the town itself can apply for this funding to get this sort of work done. So that's what our grant does. And thank you for asking.
Thank you for.
I guess my question now would be, you've listened to all this conversation, so do you think that grant is gonna address all the concerns that have been brought forward here tonight, or would we need to do some additional grant funding for?
I think that to talk about an invasive species removal grant is separate. That's separate from what the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain does. But you've got people here that are listening to you tonight that can help you through that process, that can help these citizens through that process.
All right, then, with that being in mind, would your grant identify them? You're not gonna remove them, but you would say, hey, they're there.
We have not done that in the past. I've got it in my notes though, and I'm gonna talk to Watershed Consulting about it, about the concern. They know about the concerns. We've traded emails. We've traded many messages over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
We know the concerns. We've been following them. So we're making the environmental engineering company very aware of what's going on.
But as of tonight, it wouldn't be part of the project, but it could possibly be, and you're working on that. Is there a time frame when we would know whether we could get that included too?
That's all done. That's over, that's done. My grant is signed and sealed.
Yeah, I understand that,
My
but
plan is signed and sealed. And I'm not saying that we can't look at it and can't keep it in our mind. We will. We
But-
definitely will, yes.
but if we definitely wanted to get it done, is there a way that could happen outside of, even if it took money from somewhere else to do it?
Well, it can't come from this grant.
Right.
It would be a separate grant.
But we could do it if another funding source is found.
So, Lake Champlain Basin Program does have an aquatic invasive species grant program. I think it's actually out, it may be out right now. So they have a grant that could look, you can assess the aquatic plant growth in this bay. And you can have a company hire a contractor to look at their plants and then come up with potential projects that could remedy the situation. That could be a grant. The aquatic nuisance control grant that was mentioned, that is through the state, through through the Lakes and Ponds program, and we provide 25% of the funds. So you'd have to come up with the other 75% of the funds.
Do you got any idea what type of funds you're talking?
I would think, and this is just ballpark, for a lake assessment, a bay assessment, it may cost $5,000 to $7,000. And that is just a management plan to say, here's the plants that you have, here's some of the concerns. They would take a look at the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain's report to see what's driving those factors, and they would make recommendations on what possibly could be done.
I can't help, but I gotta do this. I was a farmer all my life, he knows that. Could you give us a better deal?
No.
You don't think so? You don't think the consultants you've got coming would wanna take this on? You're sure of that?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that they wouldn't want to do it, but we haven't. I mean, we've only got so much capacity. I've got 10 projects on the ground right
Yeah.
now. And I'm not sure that I'd want to take away from the others to take you on this. When there's something in place to do this.
Yeah.
There's something to address.
And that's not, you know, you guys are gonna work together, at least to some extent you'll have to, that shouldn't be a problem, right?
I got one question first. So how do we apply for that grant? Where do we find that information? Can you forward that information to us?
Yes, I can forward you
You have
the
it.
aquatic nuisance control grant information to you.
Okay.
And then I can also provide the Lake Champlain Basin Program Aquatic Invasive Species grant to you as well.
Mhm.
I think the deadline is coming soon.
Okay.
And those are things that I could also help.
Can you send those to David?
Yes, sir.
That would be great.
Would
Thank you.
you fill them out, so all we
No,
had
I
to?
can't do that.
Just sign it. We have somebody that can fill them out. No issue.
And follow-up, I guess.
Go ahead.
The
Yep.
question you just asked
Yep.
led to an answer to my question, because to me it hasn't been clear, is the state aquatic nuisance control grant the same as what the Lake Champlain Basin program has?
Nope, 2 different grants. Actually, 3 different grants, because they have their grant looks at nutrient loads and phosphorus loads. And there's another grant pool from the Lake Champlain Basin program that looks at aquatic invasive species specific. And then the aquatic nuisance control grant is a state grant that the Lakes and Ponds program oversees. So there's 3 different grants that we're talking about. And I might also add, these are competitive grants. You may not get them. The aquatic nuisance control grant, if you do due diligence and you create a valid request and application, you will likely get the grant, but we only cover 25% of your costs, or less, depending on the motor boat registration fees for that year.
And you were talking 5,000 to 7,000 in the ballpark.
Correct, sir.
But
Yeah, to do a management plan, yeah, to study and to provide you guidelines on what may be done. So that way, when you say, okay, we have all of these things, but it may be done, then you can talk to the permitting team, and then you kind of know perhaps where you may get with the permitting team. Because the permitting team is not there to throw blocks in your way. We are willing to work with people and try to find some solutions.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna make a motion that the town of Swanton apply for this nuisance grant, whatever you call it. You know, to address this specific, issue on McQuam Shore. No, not the whole town, it'd be McQuam Shore and where we've been tonight.
I'll second that.
All right, sounds good to me. Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right. So she'll send that information to you, David, so we can get that filled out and figure out the deadline. And I see Elizabeth's back there. I'm sure she can help us get that filled out. Any other questions on this topic tonight? I think we've answered them all. Good. Thank you, folks, for coming out and all the answers, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger, do you want to talk about the grants, and that was on the next on there? Are you good with what we've talked about?
no, I think
I think we kind of answered them all, didn't we?
I think you have, yes.
Okay. All right, good then. Thank you, sir. Public hearing about proposed zoning bylaw amendments. Amy somewhere.
She just stepped out.
Yeah, we'll take a minute anyway, so let people clear out. You're next here. Evening, folks.
Jim?
Yeah.
Just thinking about your question me a little bit further, it does strike me, could the town, or should we not also be reaching out to the alphabet soup there, Lake Champlain Basin Program?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, we could apply for the state grant.
Sure.
We were hearing earlier.
And I can have Elizabeth look and see what else there is out there for grants, and
James.
certainly use any of
In the
them.
packet, I put a whole bunch of sources.
There's sources in there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Might you be able to share that information with
Sure can.
concerned residents also?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. No, he can give you a copy of what's out there.
very good.
Okay. You good?
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, Amy, it's all you.
Do you have
And
to
the board.
open a public hearing?
The public hearing.
Did you have to open it?
I didn't open the public hearing. You want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should.
Okay, we're opening a public hearing on the proposed zoning bylaw amendments.
Good evening. 5 of us sit in a little room here once a month, and we're lucky, once a year, twice a year, somebody comes and watches us. So this is a big time for us tonight.
Turn that back on.
But anyway,
Turn the AC back on.
the town of Swanton has a town plan. If you were to sit down and read it, you're reading about 200 pages. There's 2 books. One of the pages is, this is what we have, this is what we want to become. The other book is, how do we get there? Everything that's in those books is approved by the planning commission, by the select board, and down through. If they want to approve this tonight, fine. If not, we go back and change it. Or if you people wanted to change something, you can petition, and that will bring out some more hearings, and it'll go forth. Well, this one here tonight is basically a changes in the things that are taking place in the past year. There's nothing new, elaborate in this. It's just basically the changes. On the first page, if you have your agenda, this is the page that sets the book. The Swanton Planning Commission and the Land Use Development and Regulations. All of those sections are our land use plan. And before I forget, I'm not the only one who's involved in this. Andy LaRock, been with us about 5 to 10 years. Ross LeBoy, about the same. Our chairman is Jim Hubbard. He's been around about 25, 30 years, I guess. My name's Ed Daniel. I've been there for about 15 to 20 now. And Heather Bruskowski has been with us for about 2 or 3 years now. So that's the book where we find all of the type of stuff. On the page that is the summary is the things that we, basically what we want to change. And I'm not going to go through all of them, you can read them, but I'll go through most of them, and we'll touch on what we think are the high parts of this.
You have it, Heather?
Well, they need to know what they all are. You want me to just read them off?
Well, are we reading the same thing Ed's got, Amy?
Yep. So you want the summary page?
Yeah, right here.
Yep, that's
Okay.
gonna pretty much explain
You want
what this is.
Second
It's a
one.
second packet.
No, it's its own packet. David, you got another packet? Got another one of these packets for
Summary?
the summary?
Oh, you mean, is it,
It's for their public hearing.
zoning? No.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind, we're good, she's going.
Yeah.
We're all set.
So basically, if you go through this list, number 1 is to add section number, adaptive reuse of a historic building in districts where it is missing to be consistent. So this is just a consistency, same language throughout the zoning bylaws.
All right, so that historic reuse of buildings is approved in every district?
It's in the districts that it belongs in.
Okay.
It's being,
Yeah.
the verbiage is being changed so that they all match.
Okay.
The second one is change the side setback in the Shoreline Recreation District from 50 to 30. We have some 100-foot lots out there, and it's very hard to build when your side setback is 50. Right now, it's 50. So if you've got a 100-foot lot, you really can't do much.
So you're doing that because it comes up, they have to go before the development
It's always a
review.
variance or, yeah,
You'd be able to do it personally in the zoning office.
Right.
They get stuff.
right.
There's nobody here tonight.
I'm opposed to that. I think it's great.
Yeah.
One thought.
I don't know if sometimes people get really upset about planning things.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Okay.
Number 3 is remove structure from adaptive reuse of a historic barn or structure. It's to be consistent. The verbiage isn't the same in the Southern Growth District, so it's just to be consistent throughout the bylaws. Number 4 is accessory dwelling unit. So this is state statute, is now changed. It used to be if somebody wanted to build an accessory dwelling unit, they would have to go before the DRB. It would be a conditional use. Now it's permitted. They still have to meet all the criteria. Wastewater, everything that goes with putting up.
Setbacks.
Everything, yes,
And if they don't, then they still have to go before the board.
right. Add unit to accessory dwelling unit in districts where it is missing to be consistent. Again, another consistency issue. So add section 4.23, adaptive reuse of a commercial building. We're adding this because we have a few commercial buildings, the old Hamlin's Garden Center, the old Wayside Furniture, that were grandfathered in. And we want to be able to use those buildings for commercial purposes.
Amy, and it's not just those, there's many other existing buildings.
Those are
that
just
are
examples.
currently in use, that in the future are gonna be vacant, and I mean, making it harder for buildings like those to spur growth is not our intention. I mean, we hate to see buildings like that just sitting.
And you're talking about buildings that are in a, shouldn't be there now. If you were going by today's zoning laws, you wouldn't be able to do it
It
there.
may not have
Right.
been permitted,
Right.
currently, but, 30, 40 years ago, those buildings started out as something mom and pop shop type of thing that's in a residential district, that are still in use as some sort of commercial or business structure, and, I mean, it's hard to
And the
turn
DRBs
Hamlin's into anything other than really what that building was kind of used for.
It
And the
will be a
DRBs are
conditional
gonna have the
use.
ultimate say in those buildings anyways when someone wants to propose something there, so.
We're
Yes.
just trying to make things a little
Make
more
it simpler.
Be like what was done with the auditorium.
Yep,
Yeah,
same thing.
exactly.
And number 7 is that goes along with it. We did this in the R3 and the R5 because that's where we found a lot of those buildings are in those zoning districts.
Yep.
And then number 8 is just add definition of gallery. We don't have any gallery in conditional use or under permitted use, but we're kind of getting ready for some changes. So we're gonna add that definition in.
If anybody wants to know, a gallery is a room or building for the display or sale of works of art.
Okay,
Simple.
simple enough.
That's it.
They sound pretty cut and dry changes to me. Anybody got any questions?
So R3, I've got one on that, number 7. R3 is residential, right?
Yep.
Yeah, moderate
All right,
density residential.
R5 is,
R5 is residential and R3 is moderate density residential.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve this, these changes.
I'll move.
All right, I'll take a second.
I'll second.
All right. Any other discussion? All, Yep.
who found all these inconsistencies?
Where's Elizabeth?
Oh, she's the one that did it?
She's the one that keeps us on track.
That's good. Yeah,
Between her and Amy, we're pretty well set.
pretty tight ship.
These women do good by us.
Well,
All right,
thank you.
discussion. We got a first and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, folks, for your hard work. I appreciate it.
James, just a note, these will become effective 21 days starting tomorrow.
Yep, okay. Ed, something else?
Next month, we're going to be ready to sign on with regional planning for our 5 or 8 year updates. So if anybody's got any changes that you'd like to see, you'd like to see something new,
That's for
something
the town
different.
plan, right?
The town plan.
Yeah.
We'll be going through that. That's be a page by page thing for many a night. And there's probably somebody out there who has some great idea. If somebody has told to you that this would be great, tell them to come down and do it. The ideas come from the planning commission, from the public, and from individuals. I think one of the finest examples, a young lady a few years ago, she wanted to go into the bridal business. She wanted to take it from flowers, dress shop, the whole thing. And we had no provisions for that. And so she came in on a few afternoons, I did. She laid out all of her ideas, we put it into language that fits. It was adopted. I don't know if she's done anything with it, but is now in the plan, and that's all. So if somebody else has a great idea, at least might not have anything to do with it, but we'll have it in there in case somebody else wants it.
All right, sounds good.
And those meetings are on a specific night every month?
Well, no problem once we meet with the lady from St. Albans Regional Planning. Because if she's doing 2 or 3 of these things, we usually meet on Wednesday nights, 3rd Wednesday of the month or 2nd Wednesday. So it's a lot of it revolves around her schedule a lot because she works with a number of them. So.
I think in the past, they made some focus groups, right? And kind of divided and conquered the town plan, so to speak. So I think those will be offset probably in our meetings, depending how those kind of get organized.
And Sandy, the next meeting is October 6th, which is the first, I believe it's the first Wednesday in October because the municipal planning grant is due November 1st. So
October 6th?
Yes. So we need to have an earlier meeting so that we can apply for that grant.
7 o'clock?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Right here?
Yes.
So the timeline of you submitting your plan is November?
No, that's to submit for the grant.
Grant application.
We were supposed-
And how long before your plan has to be put for its 5-year window?
It's an 8-year window now and it's 2023, I believe August of 2023. Yep.
All right.
So we need to close the public hearing.
I need to close the public hearing. Okay, we're all set. I'm gonna close the public hearing officially at
Thank you.
8:23.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you folks for your hard work. Appreciate it.
What's that? She's doing good.
Night, Sean. Discuss Robin Hood Drive issues with, are we gonna go in executive session for that? Where'd David go?
David was
I saw Mr. Foskey. What's that? Did you say something? Oh. David out there? I don't know if we really need to go in executive session.
Meeting?
You gonna go in right now?
I don't know.
He's here.
Yeah, do we need to go in, do we need to go in executive session to talk about that?
Yeah, we should.
Is it gonna take some time?
I don't think it'll take too long.
Well, I just wanna see what else we had on here. I think we're staying around. The only other,
Guess it depends on what time.
what's that? Yeah, Brian's got,
Ryan's here for that also.
he's here for both, so okay. So I guess it doesn't matter. All right. I'll entertain a motion to go in executive session to
Contract is.
yeah, for contracts to discuss the Robin Hood Drive issue.
I move that we find that we enter executive session for the select board to receive confidential contract information on which the premature disclosure of it to the general public would clearly place the select board and others at a substantial disadvantage.
Need a second on that?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
I move that based on the just made findings, the premature disclosure would place the select board and others at a substantial disadvantage. We enter into executive session.
A second on that?
I second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're now in executive session at 8:25. We're gonna step out back for a minute, or?
It'd be easier for everyone else.
If you guys, we'll just step out. You guys can stay in here if you want. That way you don't have to move.
You want me?
Yeah, I'd like you to